These tech pack mistakes are costing you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in missed opportunities, poor sizing, bad quality samples, and just all around bad designs. Why? Well, take it from me. My name is Shadi Adada. I'm the founder and creative director of Fittdesign, the world's first digital sportswear fashion design agency, and I've literally worked on probably over 10,000 tech packs at this stage in my 7 years of experience. I've made every single mistake in the book so that you don't have to, and we'll get right into the episode. Number one is going to be clarity. You have to look at a tech pack as an instruction manual. The quality of the final result will be directly correlated to the quality of the instructions that you provide. This comes down to many things, but number one is going to be missing callouts. If you do not specify a specific part on your garment, logo print, color, trim, the label, if you leave something up to interpretation, you're essentially relying on someone who is not you, who may not have the same interests or the same alignment of interests as yourself to figure things out. That which is not specified leaves it open for misinterpretation, and 9 times out of 10, people cannot read your mind and they're not going to give you the thing that you thought you wanted. So make sure to specify everything. Where a logo is, what size it is, how far away from the neckline, how far away from the garment center front. Be as specific as possible and leave nothing up to interpretation. Next, we have inconsistent measurements. What I typically see, especially with sort of beginner tech packs, is we'll get these flat vector drawings that are done in Adobe Illustrator. And you almost see arrows that are put for the sleeve length, for the collar width, for the chest width, for the center back. But when you line up the measurements from the front view to the back view, there's things that don't really make sense. Whereas I might have the cuff half width on the front view being labeled as 6.5 inches wide. Maybe for some reason, sometimes I see it as 6.25. Or maybe measurements are misaligned where you might have the center back measurement, which might be 27. And that's seen and listed on back view. But on the front, you have a mix of the front neckline drop and the center front measurement, which technically, when you add them up to each other, should equal the center back, but they don't align. This is because people are sort of haphazardly putting measurements directly on Adobe Illustrator. What we do at Fittdesign is we actually work all of our technical drawings on CAD flats. So they have to align because the front view and the back view are sort of flat representations of each other. They're vice versa from each other. If we have measurements on the front, they must align to the back. And that's one of the biggest issues I see. Next up are poorly drawn sketches. Things like inconsistent design details between the front view and the back view. Maybe the collar is drawn one way on the front view, but it's drawn in a completely different way on the side view. That's one issue. Another issue is seams that completely don't align. So you might have a seam that goes from the front to the back, but on the back view, it completely doesn't align the way it should on the back view. So making sure that your drawings and your sketches are correct. That's why with us at Fittdesign, and we were one of the first to do this, instead of relying on a fashion illustration, we make a perfect one-to-one 3D mock-up and 3D model representation of what the garment is going to look like in the finished world. That way we have no issues when it comes to a full 360-degree representation of the design. Also, when it comes to clarity, is using extremely vague and basic terminology. This usually comes because of a lack of knowledge and not knowing what words to use to articulate what you want. So what I might see is, I might see someone trying to emulate a Lululemon type fabric, and what they'll say is buttery smooth. They'll use this word, which is typically a word that they see on the Lululemon website, to signify a peach finish. And the challenge there is that using words like buttery smooth are very subjective. Chances are your manufacturer is not going to know what buttery smooth means. You're relying on this gap of knowledge to be figured out by the manufacturer, but that's not the manufacturer's job. The manufacturer is waiting to receive a complete technical packet from you. The second big section of issues that I see are people not being practical with how their garments are meant to perform. They may specify a fabric that completely doesn't make sense for that end use case scenario. You specify a 100% cotton for a legging, right? Because you think that cotton, for example, is a good idea because you're trying to avoid plastics altogether. That mismatch there just doesn't lead to a great product, and it cannot be done. Make sure if you specify a blend of fabric, you could say a tri-blend. What are the percentages of each of these fibers that are going in? Because a fabric that has 60-70% polyester, 30% cotton and then 10% spandex is going to perform very differently than one that has 70% cotton, 20% polyester, and then 10% spandex. So it's important to know the specifics. Also, when I specify a color, if I say red, what is the red that you've thought of? Have you thought of a fire red? Have you thought of a Ferrari red? Have you thought of a wine red? Are you thinking more darker? Are you thinking lighter? Well, that subjectivity is the same issue that I see in thousands of tech packs. They may specify something like burgundy, but the spectrum of shades that we have available is beyond comprehension. Also, you may offer the CMYK or the RGB of that red. But the challenge here is that different screens, even if you're using the same software, will represent colors in different ways. So you are then relying on someone to look at that RGB, input the color in, and then estimate with their own eye what that translates to in terms of the finished color. That's why you should use a centralized color coding system. Use either Coloro or Pantone. Also, when it comes to functionality, you are suffering and you will suffer by not specifying what types of stitching, what density of stitching, what types of seams are being used. If you have a garment that has a lot of stretch and lays very close to the skin, like a pair of leggings, and you represent your mock-up with literally just a line, right? The cuts and the seams are represented by a line. Well, are we going for a plain seam? Are we going for a mock felt seam? Are we going for a flat seam? Knowing your different types of seams actually gives you an advantage because so many people rely on the manufacturers to make those decisions. And 9 times out of 10, the manufacturer may not make the decision that you're looking for. The easiest way for you to learn about seams is either subscribe to Fittdesign TV. We've done hundreds of videos over the last 7 years, a lot of them about different seam types, or you can buy something like the Fashionary Fashion Encyclopedia. We're not sponsored by them, but we have pretty much 5 or 10 different ones of their books lying around the office, and they just have very visual guides to different seam types, different stitch types, different fabric types. You also open yourself up to massive scrutiny when you ignore things like your logo placement, your label placement. Don't leave it up to the factory to figure out where you want the care label to be put in. Maybe on the legging, they may not put it in the most comfortable position. They may put it in a part where they actually have to add additional stitches, which end up showing up on the outside. Consider as well not overcomplicating your design. Sometimes in the pursuit of innovation, we end up overcomplicating and over-engineering a design to the point where it doesn't work or it's too expensive to manufacture. The last section is I see that tech packs are not made with bulk production in mind. So they may be designed to create a sample, but they lack the information necessary for what happens when you need to manufacture the same design in multiple sizes. So I see a missing of a sizing chart with proper grade rules and proper grade measurements. If you ignore having a size chart in your tech pack, what you're telling the manufacturer is, when it comes to the bulk production where I'm going to do all of my investment, where I'm going to be spending thousands of dollars with you, I'm going to be shooting in the dark. I'm going to rely on you in order to create the different sizes for me, instead of me taking ownership of how I want my garments to fit and how I want them to actually grade across sizes. My recommendation for you, always have a detailed size chart. Have one technical flat drawing that gives detailed measurements of a specific size, and then have a size chart that has around 10 to 15 key points of measurements like the collar half width, the chest half width, the waist half width, and how they grade between measurements. Also, making sure that you have the right packaging information in there. How is your garment going to be packed? Is it going to be packed with a hang tag? Then include the tech pack for the hang tag. Where it needs to be attached, on the neckline, how it needs to be attached. If it's going to be packed into a product sleeve, how is it going to be folded? Packaging information is important because if you don't specify that and you expect my factory knows that I want to create custom packaging, well, they're not going to do that because always there is an additional cost to everything. So getting what you want is also related to how you communicate what you want. If you don't say what you want, then how do you guarantee you're going to get it? Also, if you've received a sample from a manufacturer and you have feedback for them, and what you end up doing is you just send them the feedback, you send them images, and they tell you, yes, fine, let's get into bulk production. And you don't do a sample feedback section at the end of the tech pack that communicates what has been changed. If you don't do that, when it comes to time to the bulk cutting, some of the changes that you've been promised or that you've been communicated on, well, either they might have been missed altogether, or they might have been misunderstood. And this leads to frustration and literally tens of thousands of dollars of missed and wasted products. So leave a sample feedback page. Create a clear visual guide with simple, straightforward instructions on what needs to be changed and why it needs to be changed. Well guys, that is it. That is my key feedback over the last 7 years and doing like I said, 10,000 tech packs on the main mistakes that I've seen. Save yourself the time, the agony, the heartache, the thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars of wasted money, and do the tech pack the right way. You can check out a bunch of our tech pack templates on our website. We've actually pre-made over 2,000 designs, all with factory ready tech packs that have all of the information that I mentioned, so that you actually don't have to bother with any of this stuff that I mentioned. You have unique designs that are crafted by the expert activewear designers that work with some of the best brands in the industry. So if you want to save yourself that time, that effort, and you want to guarantee the success of your business so you can focus on what really matters, then check out the link in the description. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please consider smashing a massive thumbs up. It really does help us out. It keeps us motivated to keep pumping out this content for you. And I say this from the very bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Fit Design TV. Until next week's episode, stay awesome.